It could be you. It could be any of you. The next major incident. You could be responding. You could be impacted. You could just be trying to get your groceries at self-checkout. But regardless, cyber incidents, more and more, are in the mindset of everyday folks. Not that you guys are everyday folks, but just use your imagination. I'm Izzy, and I've spent far too long talking about cybersecurity incidents and talking about education and all that other good stuff too, but the incidents, that's where it's really good. So a bit of background on me. So I'm comms trained, as I was explaining to someone earlier today. I do have a degree in comms. I don't use it. It wasn't very useful at all. Don't get one. And then I spent a really long time working in the public sector, working in health and social services, helping people get on with their lives. And it turns out that health and social services have a huge, huge amount to do with cybersecurity. You can learn a lot about human nature in those fields, and human nature is at the centre of cybersecurity. Then, as some of you may know, I was one of the CERT originals, which was the most incredible experience I've ever had. Such a cool place to be. I learned all sorts of wonderful things, like that Kaspersky is not Kaspersky, among many other useful things as well. And then recently, I've spent the last couple of years consulting. So helping all sorts of organisations and all sorts of different people understand security and understand how to make it better. So, in the words of the immortal Taylor Swift, you wouldn't last an hour in the asylum where they raised me. So today, I promised you a 5-year review of cybersecurity incidents. It turns out there's been quite a few, and so we've just got a couple of examples. But what I'd like to lead with is how, what cybersecurity comms is. I'll give you some examples, but I want to also topline that. I want to give you some things that you can do when you get home, because I know you're all itching to write some key messages. So first up, what is security comms? Sometimes, to my displeasure, people introduce me as, hello, this is Izzy, she's good at words. That makes me want to pull my own teeth out. Please don't do that if you're talking to me. Because it's more than just being good words. It's more than just being the colouring in department. Comms is about connecting people to content, connecting people to our industry. It's hypercritical. And yet, as some of you may know, and as I keenly know, there are very, very few people working in this trade, particularly in New Zealand. So why is it important? Well, I love Maslow's hammer. I think it is one of the most useful ways to explain why security comms is critical. So if you don't know, Maslow's hammer is the idea that if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. So we can't just, and the reason why this is important is we can't just use the tools that we as individuals have always had to solve different and evolving problems. We have to lean on each other, work together, and understand what other skills and tools people can bring into this industry. Because security comms is evergreen. In peacetime, we talk about education, we talk about awareness, we talk about why, yes, the MFA is super annoying. We all think it's annoying too, but you've got to do it because it's the right thing to do. In wartime, during an incident, it's hypercritical, right? The incident is nothing if we're not communicating it to people. The technical response alone is not enough to get us out of the shit anymore. And then recovery, it's the new normal. So we've got to change our approach. We can't just go back to doing the same thing we've always done, and we can't talk to people about security the same way we always have as well. A couple of years ago, I spoke at CHCon about how COVID and cybersecurity are kind of the same thing. And I think nothing is more true than thinking about that spectrum of normal and the new normal. And one thing that I've been thinking about a lot, and that I'm sorry anyone who's ever worked with me in this room because you've heard the speech before, is there is big C communications and there is little C communications, and they are different beasts. And I was speaking to someone after the last time I gave a version of this talk, and I'd missed this slide, so thank you, Serena, this is for you, that being able to communicate with each other, be able to have interpersonal communication is different than big C communications. It's different than the way that we communicate as an organisation or as a government or as a system. And so we have to use different tools and techniques to be able to do that meaningfully. So the example that Serena and I were talking about was CrowdStrike, right? So on the ground, that little C communication was fantastic, right? It was people were getting the right information, responders were being able to do the work that they could do. The big C comms, really dodgy, right? The CEO was too low and too slow. And so both things can exist at the same time. And now, this is really just me talking to my friends from the stage, it's fabulous. Erica mentioned earlier that I was going to talk about diversity, and I am going to talk a little bit about diversity. Because this is who I do diversity for, these are my kids. And the world that they will enter, the employment system that they will enter, the cybersecurity system that they will enter will be different because of the diversity of our industry. It is super critical for little girls like these two to be able to see themselves in this industry, right? And that at the moment is probably not true. But before we do diversity, either gender diversity or any other type of diversity, including diversity of skills, which is where I come in, we must do inclusion first. We must make the space safe for people to land, otherwise we are just setting them up to fail. So with that, I'd like to run you through what I call my golden rules. So the first one, transparency. I was in the public service for a long time. I did 16 years in the public service. I didn't love it every single minute of it, but I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned was a little beauty called the Official Information Act, which pretty much meant if you say anything, you have to tell everybody about it unless you can do some jiggery-pokery. And so because of that, the way I learned to do comms was that information will eventually have to be shared. And so why not be the one who shares your information? Why not be the one leading your story? And so one of the things I talk often to companies who are experiencing cyber incidents is to own your narrative, and the way to own that narrative is to be transparent. Because if someone's going to find out, do you want them to find out from Reddit? Do you want to find out from the Herald, or do you want them to find out from you? The answer is C. He aha te mea nui o te ao. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. This is a very common whakatauki. What is the most important thing in the world? It is people, it is people, it is people. And never has this been more true than in communications and in cybersecurity, right? We wouldn't need systems if we didn't have people. We can't just automate everything away. There will always be people interacting with the technology that we're responsible for. So we must make it meaningful for them, and we must keep them at the center of the work that we do, because they're having a shit day too when we're having a shit day. Say sorry. I'm like obsessed with sorry. And this is a bit of a double-edged, sort of a dual purpose slide. You've got to talk like a person and you've got to apologize. So you can't, like, how many emails have you had from someone who's breached your data with some nonsense like, we unreservedly apologize? No one says I unreservedly apologize when I bump into you in the supermarket. Just talk like a person, create connection where you can, because that is going to help you get through that incident much more meaningfully. Also, yeah, I know that like you can't say sorry and lawyers and blah, blah, blah. So any lawyers, please don't be mad at me. Use your team. We're in teams for a reason, right? We're social beasts. And so we have to use the resources we have. And there have been many excellent talks on the stage this morning speaking about how that diversity is so critical, how you can always bring something new because of your background. I was speaking to someone earlier and saying that actually one of my earliest workplaces that I bring many skills from is my team, is my time selling shirts at Hallenstein's, right? Because if I can sell you a shirt, I can probably sell you some MFA. Relationships are everything, and that means building those relationships ahead of time. Because as a friend of mine likes to say, Mid-incident is not the time to be exchanging business cards. You have to work at and build those relationships ahead of time so that when the shit hits the fan, you've got someone to call who will answer your call. Values. Values are so critical. They are the yardstick that will guide you. This is both organizational values and personal values. If any of you have ever done those kind of workplace personality tests, I'm like off the chart on values. They are the center of who I am. But I find it an incredibly useful yardstick for trying to identify what is the best thing to do in a given situation. Because if you can get your gut aligned with the right response, then it's going to be muscle memory to respond. And you've got to do that because eventually it will get out to the public, right? And haters are always going to hate. Thank you, Taylor, our Lord and Savior. So then, what has changed in the last 5 years? What's this evolution looking like for particularly security comms? First of all, there's significantly more mainstream media coverage of cyber incidents all the time. So this isn't just something that we talk about now. This is something that your mum's seeing, that the postie's seeing, and that the person checking out your groceries is seeing. So we have to make this content more and more accessible for people so that we can tell this story meaningfully and effectively. When I say less expertise, there is a plethora of expertise in the security field and less in the media field. So back in my day, when I started in comms many moons ago, there were specialist reporters for almost every topic. And now what we're seeing is significant generalization. You've got niche media, like the likes of Risky Business, who are obviously producing incredible content about cybersecurity, but your nan is not seeing that. What they're seeing is junior reporters writing stories about things that they don't, they're calling it Casper Sky, and they don't have anyone to turn to. They don't have anyone to check their work who is familiar with tech content, and so we're getting lower and lower quality in that increasing volume of coverage. And also, cyber is now the boogeyman, right? It can change its stripes. And so every incident that vaguely might be computer related is suddenly a cyber attack, according to the Herald or Stuff or Radio New Zealand. And so there's also quite a lot of myth busting involved that needs to be done so that people are getting correct and actionable information. And on top of that, we've got this post-pandemic world, right, where we've got an increase in mis and disinformation. We've got people seeking information in these really niche little corners of the internet where they're critiquing mainstream media. We have also, I can't read this. Yes, we've also got reduced trust in public institutions. So COVID really did a number on how people turn to government or to media. Pre-COVID, people trusted media for information in a natural disaster. This was from a survey that McDem did before they were called NEMA, that 75% of New Zealanders would turn to mainstream media first for any information on a natural disaster. That's now significantly reduced. I think it's down to something like 50-something%. So a large number of people are sourcing and creating their own information. And they're trusting their peers over official sources. So it's an incredibly complex environment. We don't have enough people doing the work, and surprise, the cybers are still bad. So I'd just like to run through a couple of quick examples, and then hopefully we can talk about what we can do better in the future. So the first up is Optus, September 2022. Is anyone from Aussie here? Is anyone impacted by the Optus breach? Yeah, a couple in the audience. Bad day. So compromised via an open API endpoint, and of course, 1 month before the release of Midnight's Taylor Swift's 10th studio album, just in case you're measuring time as I do. And so in terms of the breach itself, data breach of, I'm actually going to go over to the podium because it turns out these glasses really need a redo. Breach of 11 million records discovered by Optus. And the following day, a ransom demand is posted online. Not a lot of action for the attacker here. So a couple of days later, they're like, look, I promise I was bad. Look, here are some things. And September 26th, big day for Optus, because the minister, she was cranky. So she just went out to media and said, this is completely Optus's fault and they're doing a terrible job. And my favourite part of this whole thing is a manager from Optus gave what I think is the worst media interview I've heard in my almost 20-year career. I was going to include some audio from that interview on here, but I would have melted into a puddle on the stage because of secondhand embarrassment. It is terrible, and we'll have a chat about that afterwards. So the next day, those people who were in the portion of released information, they started getting extortion attempts, as we would expect from any public breach. And then, surprise, that same day the attacker went, oh, holy shit, sorry, this was like not what I meant to do. It's like way bigger than I thought it was going to be. I'm just going to delete it, and if you guys could just all forget about it, that would be really neat. Thanks so much, goodbye. And then a whole lot of aftermath, right? People are still dealing with the aftermath of this attack. So then, what went wrong? Too low and too slow. The media waits for no one. So the Optus breach, the information about the Optus breach was leaked to media 1 hour before they put out their media release, because they spent 2 days writing a media release. I can write a media release in 20 minutes, just in case you're wondering how long that process takes. So there was so much bureaucracy involved in the way they wanted to manage it. They were so heavy-handed in their approach to media that it meant that they got pipped at the post. There is such thing as bad press, and I like to tell everyone I media train that there is such thing. You know, you don't just want coverage, you want the right coverage. And the wrong coverage would be, as a manager of Optus, getting on the radio and just talking about how the breach affected you as a customer and nothing about the other 11 million customers. That would be not good. That's Richard Head behaviour. And then the minister. So as a major supplier of telecommunications, Optus is under ministerial pressure. You know, the minister will care if you do something bad if you are Optus. And the minister had her own motivations, but also Optus should have been able, any stakeholder engagement person with half a brain could have figured out that the minister would probably be grumpy. So then, what is the scope and scale of this incident? Okay, so we've got 11 million current and former customers' data exposed. There's 10,200 of those people had their data posted online as kind of proof of concept, I guess. And they were only asking to sell this data for $400K, which is a bargain, really. Especially given the ransom was also a bargain basement price of like, I think it was $1 million, maybe 1.2. So, you know, clearly someone who didn't know quite what they'd gotten themselves in for. So then, what do we do with this? How do we learn something from this incident? This is like the drum I will bang forever. But if you're sorry, you've got to say it. You can't just infer it. You can't use weasel words. Your key messages are not going to save you here unless your key message is sorry. Just say it. It's fine. You'll be fine. And just like have a fight with the lawyers later. It'll be great. Media training. Media training is tricky and hard, and there are some people in this room who are media trained and they know that it sucks. But it sucks more when you're talking to a journalist and you fuck it up. So you've got to have media training, you've got to have it ahead of time, you've got to practice, and if there are any comms people in the room, if your people are bad at media training, you have to send them back. That's embarrassing for everybody, but it's still less embarrassing than the front page of the Dominion Post. Figuring out those stakeholders. You've got to know who your stakeholders are ahead of time. You've got to build relationships with them. That's lots of cups of coffee, lots of emails, lots of heads ups, lots of no surprises, because you need them to trust you in the moment, particularly if you need space and time. So I wasn't going to tell the story, but I will. As an example, many years ago, this is not a security example, I worked for a hospital. So I was one of 2 comms people for the hospitals in the Wellington region. There was not enough comms people, in case you're wondering. And a high-profile New Zealander's adult son was in a major accident. He was going to pass away. And we knew this was happening, but we knew that we needed to give the family space. But because we had strong relationships with those media outlets, we were able to hold off the press for 4 days. Now, that is unheard of if you have no relationships. But building those relationships ahead of time will mean the world, either to your organisation or to specific individuals. So knowing that you have those relationships and that you can use them, but also that you're doing the give and take is really, really important. Speaking of media, you must know the media environment that you're operating in. So Australian media and New Zealand media have a lot of similarities and also a lot of differences. And one of the big differences in Australian media is that they don't have like Radio New Zealand, right? So they don't have kind of a public broadcaster that is news only and kind of, long form journalism. What they have is talkback radio. So the only time that you get news media on radio is with a talkback component. And so what Optus learned really quickly is that not only did they send up the wrong spokesperson, but then she had to take calls from the public. So she had to take calls from individuals who were impacted, and she was not ready even to talk to a journo, so she definitely wasn't ready to talk to a member of the public. It was a really horrible way to learn that lesson, but it's a great way for us to learn that lesson. Assume breach is a comms rule too. For any incident responders in the room, we will know about assuming breach, but we also have to assume that our story will have leaked like a sieve. So we have to assume that people in the public sphere will know the information that we're giving them before we give them. So we've got to act at pace. And finally, consistency. What we saw in the Optus example is that every customer interaction was getting a different story. So if you called, if you went on the website, if you went into a store, you were getting different information. That's a horrible experience for your customers. It's a horrible experience for your staff. And it's a bad experience for your corporates. No one is having a good time in that. And the way to manage that is through having professionals to help you, right? This isn't something we can just wing. Right, next. Latitude. I'm sure many of you were impacted by Latitude. March 2023 was a supply chain attack, and of course, as we all know, 4 months before the release of the re-recording of Speak Now, really critical time in all of our lives. So the timeline for Latitude, again, I'm going to have to come over here, I cannot see. Cool, we've got like a scene, yay, we detected some suspicious activity, wicked. Oh, maybe we're a bit late though, because it looks like about 300,000 records have been stolen during the breach. Like, it's bad, but it's not like bad. Optus just happened. They're way worse. Well, a couple of days later, bit more info, bit more research. Turns out that there's also like some kind of gnarly stuff in there. There's some Medicare information. There's some passport numbers and passport images. So we're like right into identity theft territory. A couple of days later, turns out, whoops, bigger again. We did another count, and it's a bit bigger again. And then turns out, sorry guys, bigger again. And now by March 27th, we're looking at 14 million affected individuals. So this kind of just drags along for a while, right? Until April 11th, when Latitude received a ransom demand, which was not paid. I rang Latitude and asked them, I talked to their head of compliance, something, and he said they didn't pay it, so we're taking it at his word. And then today, this is still unresolved. People are still dealing with this. They're still working through with ID Care, still trying to manage their own impact from this breach. So what went wrong? Wow, like the language that Latitude used in their comms for this incident was bad. and it was full of corporate nonsense talk. So it meant that when you're reading these comms from them, you kind of have no idea what they're talking about. Size matters. I couldn't resist that eggplant emoji. It just makes me laugh. The size of the problem is important. It's important to you as an organisation. It's important to customers. So you have to figure out a way to wrap your arms around the size of the problem, or figure out how to talk about it without giving a number. Talk to a comms person. We're great at spinning random words. One of the other things was what I'm calling you broke it, you fix it, which was Latitude sent out a bunch of comms and then went, oh, look, if you have any more problems, can you just ring us or something? Because we can't be bothered keeping on sending you these emails. So just like figure it out yourself. Very unhelpful, in case that wasn't clear. So in the end, close to 8 million driver's license numbers were breached, 53,000 passport numbers, and 6.1 million records. Dating back to 2005. Wow, that is a really long time. Yes, AML, yes, we want to keep all the information, but this is why we don't, right? So then what have we learned from it? Well, if you're sorry, you have to say sorry. Again, I know, broken record. You have to know who your customers are. You have to be on top of your information. You have to know what you're collecting and why. You know, this is one of the privacy principles. It's critically important. Yes, it's easy to forget, but you have to know what information you're holding and who it's about, and if you should be holding it at all. Because if it gets breached, you're going to be running around like a headless chicken trying to find those people and contact them as part of your privacy obligations. So that goes on to the next point, which is knowing what you hold and if you should hold it at all. And having a plan in place for that privacy lens across your data is really, really critical. Numbers. Numbers are hard. Numbers are really tricky. If any of you knew me in the CERT days, you will know that I was famous for saying a small number of reports, or less than a dozen reports, or some other dodgy way of saying it was like 3. Because if you can't confirm it, you shouldn't say it, right? It's not helpful. You can quantify it, but be really careful with dodgy numbers particularly, because media in particular will latch onto them. If it's your breach, you have to own it. You have to lean into that response. You have to be the ones communicating with people, because otherwise other people will, and they are not going to be kind. And the last part is talk like a human. We can't just keep talking nonsense, talking corporate garbage, or talking technical, jargony nonsense and expecting people to be able to do something with it. We owe them more. We're beholden to customers, and we're beholden to those who use our services and products. So we have to treat them like that. They're critical to the work that we do. So we've got to talk to them in a way they can understand. So then, what do we do, right? Here we are. I've just told you all the doom and gloom. And I should pause here and say, every time I do this talk, I get to the questions at the end. There's no questions today. And they say, have you got a good example, though? Like maybe just to lift our spirits? No, there are none. Everyone's doing this badly, so I guess that's great, because we're all in the same boat. There are pockets, like I spoke to earlier about CrowdStrike, there are pockets of really excellent literacy comms where people are getting the right information at an operational level. But at the strategic corporate level, we're not seeing anything great, at least not recently. There has been some older stuff. If you want to see a good example, although it's old, there used to be this app called Time Hop. No one's as tragic as me, so you probably didn't have it. It was great. It was like, this is from my pre-security days, and it was wonderful because I'm a peak millennial. And so it showed me all of my social media posts from that day in the past. Oh, the wonders to relive. Anyway, they had a breach. It was terrible. They had access to everyone's social media, and whoops. But their breach comms was fantastic, right? They were open, they were honest, they were upfront. They updated it regularly. They included both information for consumers and information on the technical breach itself. It started with the highest level information and worked down in a reverse pyramid structure. It's fantastic stuff. So highly recommend looking that one up. It is not recent, but I haven't seen any recent good ones. So, you know, maybe your one will be the next good one. I don't know. Good luck. So then what can we do? What can we do better? We have to expect more from those who look after us. And by that, I mean everyone who is serving consumers, and I also mean those who are responsible for protecting all of us. So whether we're speaking about CERT or the NCSC or the police or the telcos or the banks or anyone else in between with any other product, if our products or services are impacting on people, or if we're talking about how those products and services impact on people, we've got to put people at the center of how we talk about it. We're not talking to ourselves. In this room, we're talking to ourselves, right? This is a safe space where we can talk in the nerdiest jargon we like. But once we leave that door, that's not the case anymore. So we have to be responsible to all of those who are impacted by the decisions we make every day. We've got to lead by example. If you have a breach, see, it's like I knew my slide was coming next. I didn't. If your breach is the next big one, yes, it's scary, like hold on to your britches, but also this is a great opportunity to lead by example. This is a great opportunity to lean into the response and to make something amazing. Please do, because then I'll have something to put in my slides next time. You'll be helping me too. I spoke earlier, but I'd really like to reiterate that diversity, and by this particularly I mean bringing more comms people into the field. I think I know maybe 2 or 3 other comms people in all of New Zealand who work on cyber. And there are very few of us who speak this language. But I really struggle to recommend it to other people who I know from my original industry, because it's not safe. It's not safe for people to come in, to ask questions, to be vulnerable at the moment in every organisation. I think that collections of people like who are here today, I think you are a strong representation of the good in the industry. But that doesn't mean that there are no Richard heads around. And so we've got to be influencing internally to make it safe for diversity to occur. Because if we just try to bring in diverse people, whether that's diverse backgrounds, gender, sexuality, whatever it is, we have to make it a safe place for them to land. My favourite thing to talk about, my favourite phrase that I use in every single incident, is one that comes from Peter Hughes, who was my first CE in the public sector. And he always said, own it, fix it, learn from it. If you take nothing else away from today, take that. Because that is what's going to keep you sane and keep you safe in an incident. Those are the 3 things that will endear you to the public, will endear you to your organisation, because that is the core of any response. And this kind of fits with the diversity thing, but we have to respect the importance of different skills. And that is both bringing in different trades, but it's also, what's been spoken about earlier today is that not everyone started their careers with a comp sci degree and ended up in this room, right? Some of us started selling shirts at Hallenstein's, and those skills are just as critical. The things I learned selling shirts at Hallenstein's and as a receptionist and working in tertiary education are all valuable to me every day in cyber. You will all have those skills too, and the new people we bring into this industry will have those skills too. So remember that diversity is what makes us stronger, not something that waters down the industry. And then, hire specialists. There's been a lot of talk at the conferences happening, particularly this year, about the importance of soft skills, which I hate, don't talk about soft skills, the importance of, communicating security to people. But you know what? There are no jobs for that currently. So if you want that to happen, this is a skill that you have to hire for. These are things that people train for. It's not something you bumble into. And so hire for those skills. Speaking of, maybe hire me, because I need a job. Anyway, that is all from me. Please stay in touch. Link up with me. I know LinkedIn is so tragic, but here I am. I'm a corporate tragic. I love talking about this stuff. I will talk about this till the cows come home. Please, let's have a chat here or online. And thank you.
Busted.